Daily Detroit is brought to you in part by your Metro Detroit Best Choice Roofing. Whether it's time to replace your roof, repair it, inspect it, or get your gutters cleaned, Best Choice Roofing provides top-notch roofing services tailored to meet the unique needs of Detroit homes and businesses. They serve the region and inside the city of Detroit, too. Find out more at bestchoiceroofingdetroit.com. That's bestchoiceroofingdetroit.com. Or call 313-474-7031. That's 313-474-7031. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Your Daily Detroit, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. It is a day of joy, a day of victory here in Detroit this Monday, April 29th, 2024. I am Jer Stage. Joining me on the line is Fletcher Sharpe. And Fletcher, one, it was great to spend the weekend with you, but two, I feel like the whole city, the whole region is basking in like a post-draft afterglow. I haven't seen so many good comments and good vibes in the city in a really long time, Fletcher Sharpe.
Yeah, no, it honestly, even the negative aspects of stuff that happened, like people jumping over the fence to get into the draft and break the barrier, you had people who were like, those aren't Detroiters, they're from out of town, or they're from really far away. And like normally you see that and people just like kind of dump on Detroit. But even those people were like, that's not the spirit of the city at all. They came and did an amazing thing. And to me, that's a bit more impressive just because it's so easy to uplift, but it's even harder to me to like see people being negative and be like, no, like you're wrong. It's actually something else. So to see that Detroit was one of the most, I hate to use this term, but one of the most popping places over the weekend. And I couldn't have been more proud to be a native of the city.
For sure, man. And I went to this press conference this morning because, you know, I never stop working, Fletcher. I was up with Mayor Mike Duggan, Police Chief James White, Claude Molinari from Visit Detroit. I kind of got a snapshot of some of the stuff we already know. Now, we don't know the full economic impact yet, but they do expect it to fully exceed what they had planned. Here's an interesting stat for you. In more than 120 years of tracking hotel revenue, Visit Detroit said that this is the most revenue for hotels in Southeast Michigan ever. That's what we're on track for, which is insane. One of the people who own Detroit 75 Kitchen, you know, that guy who you always see on Instagram who with all the chef tips, well, his brother is the CEO. Chef Mike is online. His brother, the CEO, he's a numbers guy. He said that they slang 15,000 meals those 3 days, which is bananas. And then Chief White said something that I was stunned by, and it's not because I'm like down on Detroit or anything, just the statistical math of it all. When you have 775,000 people who come through, and on top of that, you have all of a couple of arrests and like some warnings and things like that, but just a couple of arrests in this entire thing. It shows you what can be done when everybody works together. The police presence was there, but not over the top. Everybody came with good vibes. This is something that I think Mayor Mike Duggan can rightly be like, hey, this is a win. And Mayor Mike Duggan made a point that all the other stuff is, you know, really, really good. And, you know, as I was downtown, they're already starting to like disassemble the draft, get things together to have all the streets open for next Tuesday, because there's just so much that they've got to take down. But Mayor Mike Duggan made the point that the goal of all of this is to really look 3 to 4 years in the future. And does an event like this help, and he really believes this will happen, help encourage more people to consider living down there, to get more people interested in opening up their businesses, because they've seen it. And at the end of the day, if you see something, that's when you believe that you can actually do it. I think back to a party that I went to where I saw Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, and he made a similar point that, you know, people invest in the things that they see and that they have experience with. And so many people seeing it, seeing what Detroit can do at this level and so smoothly, is you're going to have more people interested in living in the city. You're going to have more people interested in investing in the city. And the hope is that like 3 to 4 years down the line, there's even more economic activity and kind of a boom to that, Fletcher.
I would agree with that. My one thing I will say, not to be a stick in the mud, it was a little surprising and I guess a teeny bit disheartening. There's some businesses downtown that I'm pretty sure probably thought they'd have a lot of people coming in and out of their store, but because of the way the draft was set up, adding extra fences, so like it kind of kennels people in to where they're supposed to be. As a result, some bars and restaurants probably saw a lot of reduced foot traffic as their doors were not easily accessible. And as people will peep, if you make things hard for people, unless they really want it, they won't do it. So here's the hoping that people did, come down and enjoy the city and they want to come down and be part of Detroit. But here's the hoping they didn't see that part and use that as their fundamental thought process of what happened.
So I've been talking to some business owners, and I hear what you're saying because I saw some of the barriers in front of some places. I actually heard from a number of listeners about how some folks who would normally go downtown avoided it about the crowds, but in fact, Detroit could handle so many more people. So like we had a listener that had dinner at Lumen over the weekend and said it was pretty quiet out there. And it's because people who would normally go to that, like it would normally be a hopping place, but people who went to that, they were like, hey, the draft's going to be there. I don't want to deal with the crush of people. But it turns out that downtown Detroit can handle, and Detroit in general, can handle way, way more people at the same time than I think a lot of people realize. And I found a post actually by Detroit's historian Jamon Jordan I thought was interesting, highlighting all of the events in the past where we had hundreds of thousands of people downtown. And it really makes me think, and I'm going to write up a piece about this, about how really I think Detroit can handle so much more than we think about. It was so cool to see so many streets outside of that draft kind of blast zone, if you will, see it full like a city should be. And I can't help but think, you see all the pictures of old Detroit and whatever, but man, that was like in the 40s and 50s. That's people's grandparents and great-grandparents' ages. And Detroit, those pictures look a lot different than the Detroit of today. And I think it's powerful to see a modern Detroit, a Detroit that is far more diverse, far more entertaining to me as far as background. See those people out and about and everybody together. I think it's that because people need to see it to believe it, and I feel like with this, people could see it to believe it with Detroit.
I mean, it's really no surprise to you or I that they can handle more people. I mean, growing up when I did in the city, it's still the same amount of space, probably some more buildings in the way. But like there was a population of like 1.4, 1.3, 1.5 million people in the city. So I know that they can handle a fair amount of people downtown all at once. We've seen parts of it. And even when we saw parts of it, it didn't really feel as congested as it felt this weekend. This weekend at points felt like, wow, can this withstand all these people? But we've seen more people down there and it feels less dense. So I'm glad that people are starting to see like, oh, wow, this is what it was like in old Detroit. Let's get back to that. And I do really want to get back to that because the city deserves it. It's really, I know people want to try to down Detroit again, but it's really a great downtown area to be around.
For sure. And I think that we need to think a little bit bigger when it comes to Detroit. I get some crap for this because I tend to be a little bit of an optimist, to say the least. But, there's this whole like growing Michigan's population and all of these debates of how are we going to do it. I know a lot of people who I trust greatly are like, you know what? That goal isn't real. There's no way that we can grow Detroit's population or grow the state's population. But there's so much more room, Like I was walking in Corktown and I saw like big old lots where we could still build stuff. I saw where, we could build more densely throughout greater downtown. And I don't see why we can't have a goal that's a little bit higher. We should think about, instead of adding a 500 or 1,000 people to get the kind of density we need for these businesses to succeed. Like I want to see 20,000, 25,000. Like I think we could hold 50,000 people more in time. And I think it could be still have room to go with this, just to be like very honest about greater downtown and what it can handle.
Oh, for sure. And again, like I hate to beat the same drum over and over, but like Detroit deserves this. And I don't want to talk about specifically people, but like the city itself deserves to be back to where it was because it's home. And like you want to see the best for your home when possible.
Okay, Fletcher Sharpe, let's talk some football. There were picks. We talked vibes. Now we're going to talk about the football. There were a number of picks the Lions made beyond Terry and Arnold, who we discussed on the Friday podcast. If you missed that, go check it out. By the way, I've seen some interviews with Terry on since then. I am so impressed with this guy. So impressed. But anyway, there's a number of picks that the Lions needed to fill some holes. Before we get started, and we'll go through them pretty quick, but what is the best of the best, or the one that you're most excited about, regardless of round?
So I'm going to cheat. I have two. Second round draft pick, Enos Rakeshaw Jr., cornerback out of Missouri. I like the pick. While his coverage skills are not necessarily great, which makes people worry, think back to Cam Sutton, CJ Gardner Jr., etc. The thing I like about him is he wants to hit you. I use this example. When the Pistons drafted Kentavious Caldwell-Pope all those years back, I was worried about him because I looked at his highlight tape, and literally almost all of his highlights were him shooting a jump shot. And I was like, he can go to the rim, and I'm like, no, all he does is shoot. Look at that. All of his highlights are him taking shots. That doesn't really help me in terms of, feeling good about him. All of Enos Rakeshaw's highlights, for the most part, were of him tackling someone, not laying someone out, not picking a pass off, but wrapping his arms around someone and pulling them down violently. And I like that as a DB, especially with the Lions defensive backs who really struggled to make open field tackles. I don't think Rakestraw is a starter off the bat like the way Arnold might be, but he's someone who can come in passing situations, screen pass, something behind, some short play, and make the hit and make sure that it goes from not at third down to first, but third to fourth, or fourth to turnover and downs type of situation. He can also definitely help in special teams making open field tackles. While I think he's a bit of a development in terms of, his coverage skills, he's not necessarily super quick. His zone coverage might give him a bit of some trouble. If he puts his arms on you to jam you, you're not going the way you thought you were. If you thought you were running a slant, no, it's now an out route. You thought you were going deep, no, you're stopping right here for a stop route. Wherever he puts his hands on you, the route typically tends to stop. And I'm excited about having a player like that on the roster, especially to pair with, a Meek Robertson, who they signed from the Raiders, who's also kind of a pit bull. Like, you get two corners like that who just want to put their hands on you and you just don't go anywhere. It makes receivers change their mind about stuff. And the other guy I'm interested in, intrigued by, Sion Vaki, safety running back out of Utah. I'm intrigued because the media announced him as a safety, and all the draft projections were of him as a safety, and the Lions announced him as running back, Sion Vaki, which is, I know Ben Johnson, that was reportedly excited about, his ability, his dynamism. He's a safety by trade. I know in high school everyone plays both sides of the ball, so obviously he has, some time running with the ball in his hands. But Utah had a rash of injuries in their backfield, and he's like, I can step in and play running back for sure, which is like a big Dan Campbell trait, someone who just wants to help regardless, whether it's I'll throw for 10 touchdowns, I'll snap the ball, I'll kick an extra point, I'll punt, whatever. I'll just go out there to go help. It's like being just a football player, and that's what he is. He increases his chances exponentially of making this roster as a special teams player, which he was all Pac-12 special teams, all Pac-12 defensive back, because his versatility helps. And also, it's just good to have someone who just wants to go out there and help the team win in any capacity.
So there's a few more names to talk about. Giovanni Manu, British Columbia, Canadian guy.
Yeah, he is, if this was NBA, it'd be a draft and stash where like they draft a player and send them immediately to Europe to go a season. They can't really do that here, but if he works out the way he's supposed to, it'll be a big steal. He's a massive man, 6'7", 350, runs a 5-second 40-yard dash with a 33-inch vert. That's insane. 350 pounds, 5-second 40-yard dash. Like, if they had him back in the 60s, they'd be accusing him of witchcraft, because there's no way a man that big moves that fast. But he's definitely a project. He played in U Sports, which is a Canadian version of the NCAA. While he was all Canadian, which is great, the competition in Canadian football is not necessarily great, so you worry about that. But he has the luxury of taking some time to cook, because he has Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell ahead of him. So, like, him as a tackle, he doesn't really need to come out there and play right then. It's a good chance to learn behind two of the best tackles in the NFL currently. He also played some guard in college, so if they need him to fill in, he can definitely do so. Powerful guy, can be a little quick, But again, you worry about the competition because, again, Canadian football is not American football.
And then a couple others left.
Yeah, Mekhi Wingo, tackle for LSU. He was supposed to be gone before the Lions got him. So getting him is a steal. I'm not really sure why he fell. I think maybe size concerns, as he's 6 foot 285, which is still a very large man. But defensive tackles are typically larger. But him not being higher than 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", 6 foot, he's like a bowling ball, like a little bowling ball built bear. So he's very hard to move. He's not super tall. He's 6 foot 285, but he's strong. He might get slowed down by longer guards, but he's never really overpowered, which is what you want from a defensive tackle, especially someone on the inside. And with his quickness, he can play a little bit on the edge. You don't really want him there, but he can help there. He can help stretch out the defensive line to help Aiden Hutchinson get free. Yeah, he was supposed to have been gone by like the 4th or 3rd round. So the Lions getting him at 6th is a very big steal. One thing about him, another Dan Campbell trait that I know people will love, he hurt himself during his senior year. And he could have done like a lot of seniors do and just packed up and said, I'm going to prep for the draft. My season's over. But instead, he prepped himself and got ready for LSU's bowl game to play in the bowl game to show that. And they asked him why. He's like, I'm a team captain. These are my brothers. I didn't want to let them down. I know I could have done X, Y, Z, but at the end of the day, it's about the team I'm on. And like, you want a player who feels that way about the team that he's on, because it shows that, again, it's not about me, it's about the we. And that's how you win games, is with later in the draft when you get players who are willing to be selfless to help the team move forward.
And finally, Christian Mahogany, Boston College.
Yeah, he's also a big guy. Big, strong, downhill blocker at the guard spot. Probably not going to start, but he's a player for the future, similar to Manu. Again, as I mentioned, big, strong guy. But as a result, quick rushers tend to give him a little bit of trouble. But he has shown the ability to improve himself. The beginning of his year, this year, was terrible. He was not great on tape, but he made some improvements and like ended up pulling himself into being a 2-time all-conference player. This year, first team. Again, another steal. Projected to go in the 4th round, probably. They saw that he struggled with speed and were like, I don't know. So for them, the Lions to get him in the 6th round as their final pick could potentially be another steal. Brad Holmes has a really good thing of getting players who fall. And as so far for him, it's worked out really well. He hasn't gotten a player late that are like, it's a steal. And it's like, actually, I see why they went this late. Every player that he's gotten late so far in his years being here has been like, ooh, they're going to do a redraft. This player is definitely not going to be here at this time. So I know some people were kind of nervous about how he was moving around, but he's giving you no reason not to trust him at this point. And I know some people just have a general distrust of front offices, but if you need one solid front office in the city of Detroit to get behind, it's definitely the Lions by like a very wide margin.
There was some news pretty much immediately after the draft, too. This whole kicker thing is heating up. You know, Michael Badgley is not necessarily universally loved by fans after his performance last year. They went out and signed somebody from Michigan, and then there was some developments over the weekend with somebody from the Panthers that lots of people are like, hey, sign this guy. So are we going to have like a real hot fight for kicker with the Detroit Lions?
I mean, typically you do for a lot of teams, unless they have someone like an Adam Vinatieri, Steven Gostkowski, Sebastian Janikowski, who like, or even Jason Hansen, who like is the supplanted. That's the starter. You're not going to come in and knock them off. But for teams that kind of have a revolving door like the Lions have over the past few years after Matt Prater left, yeah. So they have Michael Badgley. They signed James Turner from Michigan, who's been a consistently accurate kicker, but the issue isn't really accuracy. And then they have Jake Bates with the Panthers, who missed his first 2 field goals of the season, which would be alarming, but they were from 58 and 62 yards. So like very far away. Missing a 58-yard field goal is not a chip shot, even if someone does have the leg strength of Bates' capability. But the fact that they put him out there to attempt those 2 long field goals means that the Panthers had faith in him to make them, because they don't send you out there to just kick him if they don't think you're going to make them. I know some people see Turner coming and saying, well, maybe the Lions won't pursue Bates anymore. I'm going to say not so fast to that. Because while Turner was accurate and is pretty accurate and won a national championship with Michigan, Jake Bates has hit more field goals from over 50 yards this year alone than Turner has in his entire career at Michigan. So, like, that's where the Lions' issue lies. It's not with a kicker who they don't think is accurate. It's with a kicker who they don't think is accurate from deep. And Jake Bates has shown, especially at Ford Field, he can kick from 58, 60, 64 yards. Like, that's not an issue. And I think having a weapon like that with Dan Campbell, I think if they're tied late, he'll send Jake Bates out there to win it with a field goal. I think if they're down 2 or something, he might maybe not. They're down 1, he might think about it. But if they're tied for sure, it's like, okay, 58 yards, 57 yards. If Bates is on the roster, go do that. That's something Badgley can't do. It's something that James Turner has shown he's not the greatest at. So I still think Jake Bates is in play, but they can't talk him till the season's over. I know when he first started doing well, there's a lot of swirl about him in NFL groups. All the teams that need kickers were like, check out this kicker. And Michigan Panthers head coach and former NFL coach Mike Nolan was kind of playfully but visibly annoyed that people kept talking about his kicker, because he's like, well, he's ours till the season's over. Like, people cannot contact him under contract. He's not going to be released to go to someone's team, but they should just let him finish his year and then assess afterwards, which is fair. That's a fair thing, because you want him focused to do the best he can for the Panthers, who won this weekend 35-19 over, looking ahead. That's maybe not a trait you really want from your kicker.
Do you think that Bates is an NFL quality kicker in general? Like, if the Lions don't get him, is he going to end up somewhere else, most likely? What are your thoughts?
I think there's a chance he'll at least be signed to get a chance to go do some things, just because teams need kickers from deep. With the way the NFL is set up now, like, and of course, as players get bigger, stronger, faster throughout the years, like, they develop more qualities and more traits, and you have more kickers now who can hit it from deep. Not really that many who are accurate. So when you see one who's showing you he can kick in NFL stadiums from a long distance, even if it is indoors in a dome, it makes you think we could use that, especially if we don't have faith in our kicker. Why not? If it works out, we get a good kicker for cheap for a few years before he signs another contract. You can at least give him a chance to see if he does something. I don't think the Lions let him leave Ford Field without an actual tryout, which is going to happen after the Panthers season ends. But that does leave time for training camp, because there is a gap between the two. Not much of a gap, but I think if they get him in there for a preseason game or two, there's a chance that, he could show that he can still do it.
And on top of that, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell in Campus Martius announced that although there'll be the same number of total games played, there's going to be less preseason and more regular season in the future. So more games are going to count for a longer campaign, and football is a rough sport. So you're going to need some depth, to say the least.
Yeah, I don't like the less preseason games, just from the standpoint I want players to be ready to go for the season. But I like the fact that they're not making more games. Because getting hit like that over and over, like, sucks. So if they went from just 20 games to like 22 to acquiesce and make it 18 games and 4, I wouldn't like that. So the fact they keep it with 20 is fine enough. Preserve some bodies, but it really just means if you are on the bubble, you need to perform really well in one of those 2 games.
Well, Fletcher Sharpe, thanks so much for spending the weekend with me. It was a very special weekend in Detroit. It's going to be weird going back to regular programming after this, man.
Yeah, I'm just honored to have been, one of the almost 800,000 people to be downtown to help with, this event. It was seeing photos of it. You knew it was Campus Martius. You knew it was around there, but it was still hard to take in. I mean, we were even at the media place at Lambert. Shouts out to Lambert for hosting us, and seeing pictures above of where, like, literally a few hundred feet from where we were, and it's hard to believe that we are here, but also, like, this looks like a movie, but yet we are still a part of this picture. It was just hard to comprehend until you see someone you just saw walking 5 minutes ago on TV, then you're like, oh yeah, for sure, that's definitely us.
Yeah, and Lambert Edwards has a beautiful office in downtown Detroit across from the YMCA if you ever get a chance to check it out. All right, well, we will be back on our regular stuff tomorrow. Fletcher Sharpe, thank you so much, and good to talk to you.
Of course, thanks for having me.
With that, I'm Jairus Days. Remember that we're funded by our members on Patreon, patreon.com/dailydetroit. Really appreciate your support. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.